All right, we're ready to start. Sorry, I was going to go with Swedish there for a second. That's not right. Very welcome, everybody, to this panel discussion organized by the Swedish House of Finance about diversity and inclusion in the financial sector in Stockholm and beyond. It's great that so many people have signed up, and I see a lot of people online right now, and that's fantastic. Before I introduce the panelists, let me point out that you are very welcome to engage with the panel through the Zoom Q&A function. So just type in your questions and we'll try to incorporate them. I will look at Q&A, we will look at them and transmit them to the panel. If we have time, we are scheduled for an hour and we won't go longer than that, but I think there should be plenty of time for Q&A, and if you want to share a reflection, that's welcome as well. This is a topic that's dear to my heart for many reasons, but one of them that I want to mention is that the Master's Program in Finance, which I'm the director of, has about 60% non-Swedish students, and that's basically the way it's been for the 7 years I've been here. And we're competing in a global market with the business schools, especially in Europe, but all over the world. And students come in for many reasons, but these reasons include, notably, that many come here because they're interested in a career in finance in Sweden. Not every 24-year-old is ready to commit for life, so it may not be that they are trying to, end up spending their whole career here. It might, but let's say that the 5-year horizon that many students have when they're in grad school, Stockholm is often a big draw. And for many reasons, could be lifestyle, culture, society, but also the fantastic financial sector that we have in Stockholm in many ways. And so European students, for example, are often interested in venture capital and private equity, which is very well developed here. It's not been as successful, this idea of taking talent from other countries and connecting it with the Swedish financial system, as we would have hoped. So that's just one angle on this. There are many other angles. There are other ways to think about who's losing here and why and what could be better. But so for me, it was a great chance to have this panel and to talk about issues related to diversity. And so we have a fantastic panel for this topic today. Let me introduce the three panelists briefly, and then I'm sure we'll learn more about their experiences as we go along and talk about the topics. So alphabetically, Sofia Appelgren is the founder and CEO of Mitt, a foundation that helps organizations with diversity strategies, including running a very prominent mentor program for people with academic education who have recently arrived to Sweden. She has a very broad experience of these issues in all kinds of organizational contexts, and we will hope to learn from that. Sean George is American and Swedish, or maybe I can't quite explain that, but you can, Sean. He has a very long experience in credit markets, including in London and New York, especially in London and New York. And he runs a Stockholm-based hedge fund. And I'm sure many of you have seen him commenting on the news about macro events and how they impact financial markets. Sean has been very engaged with promoting diversity and inclusion in Sweden, including as a very active mentor for many young people. And recently he's appeared in media, including internationally, such as Bloomberg News, but also in Sweden, such as Sveriges Radio and Finansliv, talking about these issues in Sweden. And so it's great to have Sean here as well. And finally, Riisberg has spent 20 years in private equity. She was a partner and on the extended executive committee, I hope I'm saying that right, of EQT, where she led the global healthcare team for 10 years. So she has a very global outlook and has, of course, seen from the owner side many large and medium-sized companies and how they work with these issues. Before she worked with EQT, she worked with Morgan Stanley and TPG, which is an important American private equity group. So with that said, I think we have an excellent panel, and the plan is to do a couple of rounds, talk about a couple of key topics with the panel, and then we will open up for Q&A. Okay, so I think that's it. Yeah, we're ready to start with the panel. Feel free, by the way, if I said something that's incorrect or incomplete, to add that when you.
I'm not the CEO anymore, but she's with us here.
It's interesting. I'm happy to kind of toot your horn, but it's also, I think it is interesting to understand your various perspectives on this. I think that's super interesting. All right, so I wanted to talk at first just about the idea of diversity and inclusion in a professional setting. Why is it important? Does it matter? Who is it for, and why is it important? And so I thought we'd go around the panel. Maybe we'll try alphabetically again, and you should feel free to kind of follow up on each other's comments and so on, of course, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So, Sofia, what do you think about this? Is presumably you think diversity and inclusion is important?
If I think this is important, that's a very good question. Some people might say diversity is not important, but once you've experienced it, you know why it is important. So, but sometimes we talk about diversity as only one perspective, and diversity means different things in different contexts. And for me, just to clarify, it means different perspectives in the same context. So it can be visible and all the things we carry under the surface too. But when measuring diversity and looking at research, it mostly means different background, ethnicity, and that's kind of where we will probably end up today too. But I would say all diversity is always important when it comes to broadening our understanding of people around us and for the world we share. So when we do that, we also gain a lot of opportunities. We do not let like the mental barriers, unconscious bias, prejudice, or anything comes in the way for the opportunities that diversity brings. And when in a new situation with different people, we can choose curiosity instead of fear, which will lead to new meetings and conversations that will also broaden the views and include more. And we have seen this so close during our 12 years, what happens when organizations actually open up, when they are supported by the knowledge and skills about what hinders them structurally and mentally. And when you actually start facing the diverse candidates with curiosity instead of doing what we have always done. And if diversity is if you lead diversity correctly with inclusive leadership skills, we can see that in the mixed groups, we will increase innovation. We will, see new possibilities to reach new target groups. We will reach out to and deeper understand the new markets around us. We also know that working genuine with diversity and inclusion attract talents from the whole talent pool. And if you lead correctly, it's more fun and increases the engagement and well-being. But also all research, not all, but many research show that you do take more bold decisions, better decision making, and the risk of missing something out important decreases. So that is the business case, but I would say that it's not only a matter of a business case. I was talking to European CEO for Microsoft the other day, and we were also discussing what role does companies have in this matter in the society where we operate. And in Sweden, we have decided that we are a democracy, and therefore we also have a responsibility to support with fair and equal opportunities for everyone. So, and what we see is that this is not the case. And so many recruitment processes are still dominated by recruiting safe through networks. So there is a lot to do, but we have the opportunity to look into many companies to see the hinders and barriers, but we also can see what happens when you succeed. So yeah, diversity is key for success, is my opinion.
Yeah, and so you certainly mentioned society, the greater good, as well as the organization itself. As you could also think of this in terms of the individuals, and I guess, Sean, that's sort of your engagement with this sort of started with seeing people in yourself actually not getting the opportunities they deserved or wanted. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, my engagement is multi-tiered, but ultimately the engagement, the way I view it is, if you have inclusion, you're going to get diversity. And why do I say that? I know that I left in 1996, and 10 years later, as an MD running, one of the biggest risk books on Wall Street, was part of creating the CDS market. Not that it wasn't a dangerous market for the world, but that's a lost opportunity for somebody that didn't get a chance. And then upon returning to Sweden for family reasons in 2016, even with the CV that I have with global heads of trading from some of the largest financial institutions in the world, I couldn't get in. And then over the years, I couldn't even get an interview for a specific role. I had a couple conversations, but nothing that led to an actual job interview. And then over the years, once I decided to go it on my own, students would reach out to me, and I'd help them, navigate to get interviews in London, and they'd get jobs. And they had a hard time even getting interviews here. And, I don't think the country as a whole wins when we have processes that are not inclusive. And I don't think it's anything nefarious or people are trying to be mean, or there's some master plan about holding people out. I think it's just that we have done things in Sweden in a certain way, and Sweden is a wildly successful country on pretty much every single level. But in this specific aspect, I don't think Sweden should be sending their best and brightest to London to compete with us. But at the same point in time, with the students that I've gotten from your school in recent months, I've been able to place 4 students in Sweden. So Sweden's not opposed to these students. It's just that you gotta work with them, and I gotta pick up the phone and call around and get them a shot. So I think Sweden is really open to it. I think it's a process mishap, if you will, that the recruitment process is slightly behind. And then I'd like to point out that the trading floors in London and New York look the way they do, not out of charity. Nobody's going to say that, Goldman Sachs and Bank of America like to do stuff for fun. They like to make money. That's their fun. And they've found that diverse groups solve problems better. And, in the trading business, at the very least, where I've spent, 25 years of my life, every morning I walk in, I have no idea what I'm walking into, but I got to deal with the situation at hand. And having a diverse team has proven to work for the larger financial institutions. And anecdotally, I'd also like to say that, I'm speaking at, I spoke at one of the large financial institutions here in Stockholm a couple of weeks ago. Next month, I'm speaking at, the largest financial institution here on the topic. So I think the dialogue has moved forward in a very constructive way. And, the way I've chosen to present it is, if we get inclusion, we get diversity, because I know the students on an even playing field, the diverse students are going to be able to compete with anybody else.
Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so this is, I guess, how Sean and I met each other in this context, was that Sean saw some of my students, or that the group category of students who don't speak Swedish and aren't connected at all in Sweden, and their struggles with finding opportunities. Well, I would be interested to hear your thoughts, and especially since you don't have to speak for EQT, obviously, your former employer, but it seems like you have an interesting perspective there, because EQT is very engaged with, obviously engaged with sustainability, as are many other in private equity. But when you started at TPG a while back, maybe it wasn't so prominent. So maybe you have a good perspective also on how this has sort of risen to prominence. Or maybe it was always there. Maybe I'm wrong about this.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. Industry has changed. I think, I think from a little bit picking up on Sofia's point, from a kind of humanitarian perspective, or as a society, member of society, I think it's that's kind of the starting point, that everyone should be given equal opportunities. So I think that's kind of really why we need to discuss it. But I also think from a business perspective, and that's probably also what my industry has picked up on, is there's been so many studies done by McKinsey and academic studies showing that if you have diverse team, you're more likely to generate good results and high profitability in your company. So I think just strictly commercially, it is something that as a leader of a company you need to take into account. But in my industry, private equity industry, having been part of that for more than 20 years, when it comes to let's say gender diversity, we're still massively behind. It's only 20% of all the women working in this industry, of all the employees in this industry are women. So even though it's filled with ambitious, smart, high performing individuals, we just haven't done enough in this on this topic. And when I say, and when I think about this commercial question, and to what extent it's really a commercial question, I'm thinking about if you are a small company and you want to start off, diversity inclusion is not going to be on top of your list, because the first thing you need to ensure is you have a product, you generate revenues, etc. But then, as you try to enter new geographies, new customer segments, you need to think through demography, ethnicity, how do I adapt my product to different markets? I'm going to be able to hire new people. I'm going to have to form new teams. And all of a sudden, I have to think about diversity, and I have to think about inclusions, because how else am I going to be able to retain my talent if I'm not thinking about these things? Competition will come and get them, and I'm going to have to spend more money recruiting new talent. So, from that perspective, I'm not saying it's going to solve itself, because I definitely don't think so. But I think from a senior management perspective, it is actually, a real, business critical issue to make sure you have diverse team and that you have inclusion. Because otherwise you're going to lose your talent, and you're not going to be able to grow fast enough, and your competitors will outgrow you. So that's a little bit, my perspective on this.
Have you seen a change in this? I think what you're saying is not super controversial right now.
Yeah.
But it was not, maybe people wouldn't have disagreed, but they wouldn't have thought of it as super important 15, 20 years ago.
No, and I think the world has changed clearly. I mean, I think that the ESG questions are much higher on the agenda. If I think about the private equity industry, where when people were diligencing our funds, we never got one single question about that. 10, 15 years ago, that has changed tremendously. So in order to stay relevant for your investors, you have to show that you work on these issues. And equally, if you're going to attract talent, whether it's into a private equity fund or whether it's into the portfolio companies that you invest in, you just have to think about who's your market, who are you serving, making sure that you don't have, let's say, management team or a group of people that look in one particular way and your market looks completely different. But yeah, I mean, it has changed. It's higher on the agenda, you know, both because of pressure from external forces and also because it makes business sense, I think.
So I think that's an interesting point to pivot to kind of talk a little bit about what the situation is right now, how things are going.
Can I just add one thing, Bo?
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
So I mean, in 1997, I did my first diversity recruitment trip for an American institution. So I mean, I've seen the evolution in the U.S. It was pretty, you know, kind of mid 2000s, you know, 2004-ish. You know, it was a very hot topic. But even all the way back to 1997, there was a strong focus on this in the US. And if you look at the UK, even stronger. You walk on a trading floor in the UK, and it's probably one of the most diverse environments you'll find yourself in professionally. And I just think that, you know, in Sweden, we're in essence behind because nobody's actually thought about the problem, but it becomes a societal problem. It becomes a resource problem, as Osra pointed out. When TCO was out yesterday, I was reading a note that they put out. They're saying 40% of the Swedish population has some form of immigrant background. Karlstad University says over 30%, whatever the number is. If we're not tapping into that talent pool as a nation, and we're letting Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America just come and raid our human capital, over time, that's going to be very expensive for us. So you know, there's a lot of lessons that you can listen. The U.S. does a lot wrong, the UK does a lot wrong, but on these points, those institutions have been laser focused. So we actually do have a roadmap of how this can be done, and I'm actually delighted to see how Sweden's responding.
And just to comment that when we started mid 2008, this was a small CSR issue somewhere in a company, and now they are pushing our corporations up to strategic and management level in so many more and more companies. So I think the awareness and the mindset is actually shifting from being an HR topic to actually a management on management group level. So, and also we had a seminar this morning about the responsibility for boards within DNI. So it's coming on all levels now, which is very, very interesting, I think. And I think what we see at Mitt is that one thing that pushed this pretty much was during 15-16 when the refugee wave came, because that was so obvious that we all had to do something to include people into our society. So I think that was one of the milestones when things actually started happening and the talent pool started changing radically in Sweden very quickly. So, well, I think I look at it in a very positive way, because I mean, more and more organizations are contacting us to get support on this, and that's a good sign, I think.
Yeah. Obviously, this is a multifaceted issue, no question. We had an event about LGBTQ individuals in business and in the financial sector specifically a couple of years ago, and I tried to think about who are the great role models. If you're gay or lesbian and you're looking for someone to identify with or see as an example, it's not that easy. With gender, I feel like the financial sector has certainly not solved all the challenges, but there's a great awareness. But when we talk about other dimensions, I feel like maybe sometimes there's still an attitude that is more like, I don't have any prejudice, and so I think that's the end of it. Okay, I'm not a racist. I'm not anti-LGBTQ. I'm not anti-women, and so then everything is fine. But I think, you know, you want to evolve a little bit beyond that ideally and say, okay, well, is the environment working? Do we have role models? Do the networks capture everybody? Or our recruiting channels, our recruiting messages, our corporate culture, you know, does the whole thing work? And so that's a bigger question. And from my experience, I see this through my students. I know that some of these other things sometimes fail, even when there's no particular prejudice. So employers might not say, oh, I don't want someone who's from France, or I don't want someone who's from Germany or India. But effectively, you know, we're looking in ways that somehow favor Swedish, native Swedish speakers, something, some group similar to that. Maybe men, but certainly Swedish speakers. So I feel like there's some way to go. And so I would be interested to hear your thoughts about what's going well right now and what's not going so well. And I think you've touched upon it in several ways. Like Sofia, you mentioned how much more prioritized this issue is. And also says it's an absolute necessity now in private equity. But still, we're not quite all the way there yet. And so what do you think are some of the things that are holding us back?
You know, I think if I start, you know, from my perspective, I think that things are really, you know, changing, and I think there is a change in you know, or there's an increased awareness, at least I would say, and I think partially this has to do with the successful startup scene that we have in Sweden and in Stockholm in particular, where you know, there's a lot of successful startups and they have global ambitions, a little bit like you alluded to, Bo, that if you know, my experience being global. So I think, you know, in my firm or with EQT, you know, super diverse, you know, team in terms of nationality and so on. So I think, you know, if you're a startup and you're gonna go global, enter into a lot of new markets, there's no way you're just gonna recruit, you know, a bunch of, you know, Swedes or a bunch of like-minded, you know, persons. So you're definitely gonna look at what are the competences that I can recruit, and if I can find them locally in Sweden, that's just great, right? Because then I don't have to you know, go too far out to get this competence and get this experience base, get this you know, knowledge of how different countries and different cultures adapt to my product, and I think there are a number of great examples of that with, you know, Klarna and what have you. And I also think from a you know, from a venture capital point of view, if you're a venture capitalist looking for the next big thing, you know, if you have a completely equal looking team of old white males or whatever, there's a high chance that you will not discover the next big disruption in the market, you know, because you just might not see it. So so I think there's really an awareness of that. That said, maybe there are many more traditional employers, if I may say so, that you know, need some more work on this topic. But like you pointed out, I mean, even if your market is domestic, you know, if it's mainly Swedish, if you're, you know, a bank or whatever, even in that situation, you know, 20% of the Swedish population is born abroad, which is a number I've seen. That was 10 or 11% 10 years ago. That means that your customer group and your workforce has changed quite fundamentally in the last 10 years. So you have to really think about this topic. So, and like Sofia is saying, I think there's actually high awareness on the senior level and on the board side, and it's kind of high up on the agenda in these you know, management rooms and board rooms. But maybe there's more education that is needed, you know, everywhere in the company. The people who are actually going to do the, you know, sort of first line hires or young associates and so on. So it's not just a top management issue. maybe there's more work needed to be done there.
I think it's everyone issue.
Yeah.
So even if we say things, we have to act and behave in a certain way to face those changes. So it's about everyone in a company, and for that we need to understand not only why, we also need to have tools to make sure we understand how unconscious bias and those things actually impact our daily behavior towards each other, but also within our leadership style, and also within inclusive leadership processes and so on. So I think, and I also think that to create change, we cannot only learn a lot of things, we need to expose ourselves to differences so we can expand our norm to be able to include more people. And because we do educate so many companies within those topics, but when the real change happens is when they step in, for example, into our mentorship program, or experience something for real that changes their mindset and make them start thinking that they want to do things in new ways. And there is so many negative news about immigrants, and if you don't have that network, that might impact you in one way or another. But when you come to our mentor program, or when you meet Sean's students, you will have a positive experience, and I think that matters too, to get your own experience by diversity, and not only reading about it in your social media or anywhere else. So I think you need to act. If you talk about this, you also need to start acting and do things differently to create results.
Yeah, that can be tricky, of course. You're saying positive experiences of a more inclusive culture or organization will reinforce the movement, but you got to start somewhere. I guess, Sean, you've spoken to some of these different companies, I think also call them, that are not venture capital exactly, more like the big banks and so on, that are more conventional. And if the venture capital firms are like some fast sailing but around the world race, the big Swedish banks are more like oil tankers, moving slowly, changing slowly. What do you think are some of the things that are going well or could go better in these big institutions?
I mean, the fact that they're facing it head on right now, because I don't think it was an uncomfortable truth. But let's face it, when you have some of the most lucrative divisions with 95% white males in them, 2020, 2021, you probably haven't broadened your perspective on how to hire people, and that they've definitely broadened how they hire from a diversity of thought perspective, from maybe an image perspective as well. A lot of these banks, portray themselves as very green and ESG, but if you're portraying one thing on the other side, and you're asking companies to change their behavior on that same side, you might get an uncomfortable question: how does the S look internally, right? I feel the wind is changing incredibly since we started speaking in the fall, Bo, that people are actually seeing this as the opportunity that it is. This is not mindless criticism of a process. This is, hey, these are assets. And in banking in Europe, Goldman Sachs is selling products to your customers. That's a fact. And if Goldman Sachs is hiring students that you wouldn't speak to that become stars at Goldman Sachs, that is an asset that we as a nation or them as a bank have missed. And I think that they fundamentally understand, and they're saying it themselves, right? The networks in Sweden have too much control. And listen, a network is not necessarily a negative thing. We all have our own social professional networks. That's fine. But when they blunt the process so that you're capturing the best candidates, and quite frankly, this happens to traditional Swedish people as foreigners as well. You know, when I put out the 473 employment opportunities in Europe, I say 80% of the people that asked for that file were Swedish.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that people in all aspects, there's a small group have doing it the way they've done it, not understanding the impact it has on their business, society, and the nation as a whole. And then you have this larger group that's like, all right, fine, I'll go work in London. That's pretty exciting. I'll go work in Frankfurt or Paris after Brexit. But these people are going to continue to drift out of the Swedish economy. And you know, you might be the next Klarna that's leaving and handing it to a European nation to make the money on it. But you know, so that's going on. It's still going on today, but to a lesser degree. But the fact is that I think everybody's kind of woken up to the fact that we don't care where you came from, Swedish, non-Swedish. We just want to get the best candidate. And SEB was the first one out with a fully anonymous application process. And I think that's incredibly important. It's the same process of getting a job at SEB as it is to get into your Skolbo. Like, you have the best student that performs the best on the test, that has the best grades, that has the best interests on the finance club or what it may be, is going to get the job, whoever it is. And that's, you know, and then we shift from, I'm not asking for charity, I'm just asking for a level playing field to compete on. And once we get that, we achieve so many different things, and innovation picks up. And the banks, you know, we have all these challenger banks, we have all this technology. I mean, I would like to think that some of that stuff would have been within the banks if their thought process was broader before, you know, this was brought up.
So I totally agree. We have been working with Handelsbanken, SEB, Danske Bank, Nordea, etc. And I mean, it's not the lack of will. It's rather start talking about how do we create an ad culture, not a fit culture. So and broaden our view of competence, but also make sure that we have the same prerequisites for everyone to be involved and engaged and part of the recruitment process. So what we see is a very strong will, but they don't know how to do it. So that's how Sean and we can help to find the talent.
Can you explain what you used the terms ad culture and fit culture? Could you explain that?
So fit culture, I mean, we often talk about when we going to recruit someone that who would fit in here, right? So instead of that, we could start talking about what would this person add to our company? That is maybe something extra that we miss out today, for example. So an ad culture, when we start talking about ad culture, we make sure that we bring in diversity and create a new, I mean, way of looking at it. So, but because you can recruit diversity, but then if everyone is going to fit into what, you will assimilate people to become the same anyway in the end. So within an inclusive culture, you want everyone to feel that they belong, but also that each and everyone is unique and appreciated for what they bring that is extra. So that is an ad culture.
Yeah.
We see so many fit cultures who would fit in here, and that is not the key for creating a successful diversity and inclusion work, I think.
Right. And one aspect of fit, it's not explicit, it's not even conscious, it's just behind the list of things that make you a good fit. There's a requirement that you speak Swedish.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think
that's super important, actually, what you said there, Sofia. I mean, I think you know, this notion of culture can be a very, very positive thing, but it can also, you know, in that respect, be quite negative. It can kind of prevent you from certain recruits, you know, because, you know, this is our culture. This is kind of how we that's, I think that's a very, very good point. And you know, if you are a, let's say, a minority of some sorts, whether it's gender or ethnicity or you know, something else, I mean, you can feel very lonely in a company.
Mm-hmm.
And that can, I mean, that will ultimately affect you know, whether you stay or not. And so I think, again, if you find this talent and you've gone, you know, all the way to actually do this recruitment, it's so important actually that you actually include the people and make sure they just don't feel like a minority in the company. And then I also think actually a little bit of a shout out also to the search firms that we engage, you know, in the companies where we're working. I have not seen very much of unbiased recruitment technologies being presented to me. And, you know, I think a lot of the search firms are still very traditional in the way they hire people or you know, that's my experience at least. So I think much more can be done there in terms of really rolling that out in a serious way.
Yeah, you have to look at results. And I think that's one big kind of mental step, is to go from saying, oh, I'm in a position of authority, I'm recruiting or promoting or something. Is this a question about my racism, my gender bias? No, you have to measure results, because otherwise you might end up saying, yeah, we're gender neutral, but we're doing all our recruitment in the men's locker room. And you notice that because the result is still that everybody's a man. And you were not, you had no prejudice, but your structure and your system and your procedure excluded all women by accident or, you know, for some reason. Great. So we have several interesting questions in the Q&A that I want to bring up. And one of them coincides with what I also wanted to bring up, which is, you know, what can we do? What's some advice? We already spoke quite a bit about what to do as if you're an employer, you're running an organization, you're running HR. But let's talk about it from the other side. What if you're a candidate? So what if I speak to one of my students and they say, oh yeah, I really want to work in Stockholm. What is some advice? And Laszlo asked this as well. Do you have thoughts about this? What can you do if you want to get a job?
Get in contact with Sean.
Well, not to inundate myself, but let me give you a couple things that I've learned. You know, I started placing people since 2017 from Stockholm, mostly to London. But as of late, I have a network in Stockholm, and I've been able to pick up the phone and place people. I have one student, you know, Isabel. She's amazing. I call her the cold calling queen, because she will call up a senior person at some of the most prestigious organizations in Stockholm and pitch them on why they need her in their organization. And if I won't name the names, but like she sent me a picture of the lobby, and she's like, I'm meeting the concern path at this prestigious organization. I was like, how'd you do that? She's like, I picked up the phone. And so don't be afraid to look. And she doesn't apply for any job ads because she knows she'll be rolled out. So what she does is she finds organizations that she thinks she'll fit in with. And then she finds somebody in the organization on LinkedIn or on their website, and she sends them a very personal email about why she thinks she fits in that organization. And it's amazing. Like, I love getting texts from her because I just got this interview, I just got that interview. And also for those of you that are uncomfortable, I mean, like, you don't have to be that extrovert to get a job. So don't fret. But you know, if you send in a resume for a job advert, send some kind of, you know, find some angle on LinkedIn or wherever it may be where you can send the person, hey, I applied for the job, or pick up the phone, or do something a little bit extra to make sure that they know that you want the job. And then also, you know, LinkedIn has the great functions where you can get everything as soon as it comes out, and you can apply for jobs there. And don't be afraid. I'm happy to give you the 473 employment opportunities in Western Europe, because quite frankly, they have explicit diversity recruitment programs. And, you know, a very, very, very large financial institution in the United States actually reached out to me 2 weeks ago and says, I want to tap into the Swedish talent. I understand that it might be harder for them there. We want them. And that does say a lot about the evolution of this process internationally, where, you know, some of the largest, most prestigious financial institutions are calling me up. How do we tap into that? And obviously I immediately call Bo. Okay, we got something that's interesting for your students. And so there's ways to do it domestically if you want to stay here. And there's ways to do it internationally if you want to do that. And on the international resumes, I think I help with diversity of thought should be somewhere in your letter.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what we've seen, I mean, we've been running our mentorship programs for 12 years now for a reason, and we're here to stay, and it only grows. So we started the program for 800 participants 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now. And I mean, what we see is that some tools, what we support with is some very hands-on tools when it comes to how to write a CV, how does an interview process look in a Swedish company, even if it looks very different in different companies, but also make sure to get a reference, in this case from maybe a mentor, that actually someone who you can discuss your competences with. So we match an engineer with engineer, for example. And I also think just for our mentees to be in a context where they meet others in the same situation, strengthen them that they are not alone, and they can support each other. So today we know that every mentee who goes through our program support more than 3 in the same situation within their network. So we need like keep the circle going. We need to support each other. But I think I really believe in this bridge between the bridge we create within the mentorship program, because in that way we both support with a very professional network coming from over 50 large companies in Sweden, and having a reference from a mentor that works at Volvo, SKF, Deloitte, or some other of our partner companies, that means so much. But also actually talking some Swedish. I think I know many of our mentees think it's hard to get in contact with Swedish people. So this is a very structured, professional way to do it, where you can discuss your future and your competence, and focus on that. So I think looking up, I mean, we are not the only mentorship program, there are more. So look for a context where you can get in contact with employers in different ways, and get to learn about the Swedish labor market, which is somehow different from other labor markets. Yes.
I want to also hear what Åsa has to say about advice, but let me comment on the Swedish business, because in all our master's programs, if you're not a Swedish speaker, you are offered a little bit of introductory Swedish. And I think my sense from my students is that it doesn't do much. And sometimes this shows up when you speak no Swedish. But if you do speak a little bit of Swedish, say you speak enough to understand a water cooler conversation, but not to run a business meeting, it turns out that wasn't actually a plus. And so sometimes I think this shows up as more of an excuse or a way to describe, put a label on what is really homophily, looking for people that are like the people in the organization right now. The opposite of being inclusive, or the fit instead of add culture. So I'm suspicious of the benefits that can be achieved. I'm not saying it's useless, but I don't think it works miracles. And I think one reason is that if you have an organization that really runs on Swedish, your emails are in Swedish, your meetings are in Swedish, it's a burden for everybody.
Yeah.
For most people to then switch to English. And I know when we had the first non-Swedish faculty, this is back when I was a student in my department, whenever he told me this several times, that whenever he walked into a meeting, everybody went, oh,
no.
you know, oh, now we have to do it in English. So this is something to look out for, I guess. Organizations where English is already established, that's going to make everything much easier.
Yeah.
Well, so do you also have advice for someone who's looking for a job in the financial sector in Stockholm and maybe isn't a native Swede or maybe isn't included naturally in the networks?
If you don't have the network and you don't, I mean, I think my best advice would be to be ambitious. I think that it's going to be generally more and more competitive. For students graduating, we're in a global capital market, and on one hand there's war for talent, but it's also going to be highly competitive to get into to the best jobs and the best positions or the most attractive employers. But what I mean with being ambitious is do research, find out as much as possible about the company that you want to be employed by, and if you don't call up the CEO, whatever Sean was mentioning, you can actually find out what are the topics, what are the challenges for this company today, and you can be a little bit more creative perhaps in the way you're pitching yourself to that company. But it takes time, it takes a lot of effort, but I think you need to be ambitious and work hard, and that's kind of the general rule, I think. Also when you get into a company, it's always kind of the hygiene factor in a way, right? You have to work really hard, and be prepared. And also about these topics that we're discussing today, if you're worried about these issues, maybe that can also kind of help you in the way when you are looking for a job, because you just have to. I mean, we can't change the way things are. We are working towards it, but the situation is what it is. So if you are aware of it, then you can also think about ways to find your angles and be creative around this. Because I'm a strong believer in, if you have the talent and if you have the ambition, you will ultimately succeed. So definitely, I think there's good hope. It might take a little longer, but yeah.
But I meet mentees that has looking for jobs for years and have double, triple exams, do everything they can, and still struggle. So I think I meet so many ambitious people. It's I was over ambitious, and still they struggle to get a chance. So what is that then, Sean or Åsa?
Well, I would. Oh, go ahead, Åsa.
No. I mean, I think it's hard to. It's actually quite depressing to hear how, let's say, uneducated the recruiters are, and the employers are. Because to me, that just suggests that there's just enormous amount of education still needed if you have talent with degrees like that, and track record and experience, and still unable. So I think it's really sad, and I think it just suggests that there's an enormous amount of education needed, and for our leaders like ourselves, we just need to bring this up on the agendas on all the companies where we're engaging.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, Sofia, I mean, the first student that I placed was a professional basketball player with a double master's. That, I mean, there was a food fight for him in London. He couldn't get an interview here. So I chalked that down to the networks, that he just didn't have the right contact networks in Sweden. And then, when some of the most prestigious jobs in the world come up, and they're calling me to help them land him. And that just, it just made it abundantly clear for me that these networks are blunting the people that could contribute, that is somebody played a sport, double masters, that's music to most recruiters' ears. Here it was slightly different, and therefore different was, I love love your saying that you know, we need the add-ons. And that's why I, you know, as you guys know, keep on falling back on the prevalence of networks deciding who gets the shot at the interview, because I know it's, you know, when I placed these 4 students this year, they were placed in Sweden. They weren't placed abroad. So something's changed over the last 6 months. I don't know what it is, but something has definitely changed where I don't have to send them to London. Now, some of these students should want to go to London, because if you want to test your sword in the biggest fight there is, you know, you want to be walking on the trading floor in London as a trader. I mean, that's why, you know, for me in New York, you know, standing, you know, on the trading floor, you know, trading, you know, billions of dollars of securities on a single day, that was exciting, right? Because I was competing against the best of the best there was in the world. Because everybody's coming in trying to take my job every single day. And eventually somebody pushes you off the cliff, and that's kind of the trade. And then you get gray hair, and then you run a small hedge fund in Stockholm. And that's part of the gig when you're a trader. So I mean, there's 2 sides to what's going on. I think students should try and get a job in London. If New York's harder from a visa perspective, should try and get a job in London, because you learn so much in these organizations that actually take real risk, that are running some of the big M&As out there. Like, you're exposed to people from all over the world. And for me as a trader, I gained so much. Like, when people's like, how did you know that was going to happen? Well, because I mean, I've been there before. I'm old. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years. But like, you learn how other people think. On a daily basis, if you're an analyst on Wall Street or in London and I call you, it's because you put something out that I disagree with. I've learned to look for the opposite of what I am at any point in time in my trade ideas. And those are the things that you get from diversity of thought and leaving this market. I know that was a tangent, but it was important.
No, that's very good. We're running out of time. We have not had time. There's so many interesting questions in the chat. Let me just touch on 1 or 2 or 3 very briefly before we wrap this up, because we are out of time essentially. So first of all, there were a couple of questions about what kind of diversity are we talking about? And, you know, there's this business with language, just speaking Swedish. I think I mentioned this, that's an acceptable way of saying we're looking for people like us. And so it's not really necessarily always about language, even if that's an acceptable way of phrasing this. But then I think it is important to reflect on the many dimensions of diversity. That's why we had an LGBTQ event recently, or there's activities around that every year at the school. And gender is one dimension, ethnicity is another. They are not the same. But fundamentally, I think the kind of organizations and procedures you want to build that are welcoming to everybody, the answer is one, and it's the same answer for all these dimensions, is everybody should be welcome. And, you know, it's thinking about, I'm on the sell side here, I'm selling talent, basically my students, I want them all to have opportunities. And I think that's, in that sense, the solutions are maybe sometimes different in the details, but a lot of it is, the end goal is an organization and an economy that works for everybody. We also talked about more advice for employers, and I think we already covered many things, but of course, feel free to reach out to Sofia. That is what they do. And Sean also helps many organizations. I'm sure there's much more to do here. We have a few more minutes. Sarah's telling me it's to 4:15. The panelists, do you have a few more minutes?
Sure.
Yes, okay, let's stay with it. Maybe people have to leave. But let's give it a few more minutes. So let's talk about this business of prejudice that I think one anonymous attendee brought up. Okay, so, oh no, sorry, it was Sophie in the Q&A. She asks, she agrees with the business case, and she says, we all agree with the business case, but she's concerned that we don't call this by its true name, xenophobia, discrimination, sexism, and racism instead of glossing it over by saying diversity and inclusion. And so I want to hear your thoughts about this. Are we skirting the problem here, not calling a spade a spade? Are we being excessively sensitive, or is it in fact, well, what are your thoughts about this? Do you think there's more to it, or?
I'll stick my neck out first so everybody feels safe running under cover. But listen, like, you know, I've been in the deep south of the United States. I know, you know, I've been called all sorts of names here in Sweden, in the US. I've been attacked by neo-Nazis. Like, I know what true racism looks like. I've been exposed to it on every imaginable level. And what we're seeing here is more a protection of a social network that has been in place for a very long time. And from my perspective, I haven't met anybody in the business community since I came back that has had a racist view on this at all. They're saying this is the way things are done, or this is, it's more that people didn't understand the impacts of doing things the way they've always done them on multiple tiers of society. They didn't also understand that the demographics are shifting in this country, whether they like it or not. I mean, it's nothing I created. It looks the way it does right now. And, you know, you can use whatever you want. If it's 20, 30, or 40, the numbers are big, and the numbers are going to continue to grow. And I think there's been a major shift in understanding that diversity is not charity. Diversity is a business opportunity. So it's, you know, there are, nobody's ever perfect, and I'm sure there's racists everywhere, but I don't think this is a racist problem. That's my 2 cents on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think I actually generally think it's a lack of, you know, on one hand, there's a history of people recruiting from their own networks, and definitely recruiting people that look and act like themselves. It's just easier, and it's considered lower risk. You know, at least that's how it used to be. So I think if you think about it, you know, I think that's more the reason than you know, sort of a sexism or racism or anything like that. I just think that this, you know, people have just not been aware of it, and has not had a great degree of interest in these topics, and it's changing now. I mean, I can give an anecdotal kind of experience from when I joined EQT, whatever, 10, 20 years ago, and EQT just invested in Findus, a frozen food company, and I just observed, to my surprise, that there was not one single woman on that board of that investment. And I actually pointed out, I thought it was so strange, because, you know, your customer is highly likely to be a woman buying frozen peas than men. But I just don't think it was it was just not, you know, something anyone thought about. It was just very natural to recruit an all-male board, because it kind of was a network recruitment at that point in time. You know, I just think that this topic has evolved, and people are seeing the, let's say, the business case more clearly, and there's been, you know, tons of studies and academic work going into this, and you know, from the big consultancies and whatnot. So you know, that's my perspective. I may of course be wrong, but my you know, view and instinct is that it's not that people have not, you know, are kind of against having women or different minorities, but you know, ethnicities in their teams. It's just, you know, just people have just not been very interested in this topic.
But I think it's both structural and mental, actually. I've been in a few boards, and I mean, and not maybe in those contexts, but sometimes you get the feeling of that it's uncomfortable to have someone sticking out in the group. In my case, being young in those contexts, and often the only woman too. So I think this feeling and that it actually becomes uncomfortable because it requires groups to start doing things differently. And if you like what you have done before and not really want to change, I become the bad person in the room. So I both agree, but I also think it is structural. I think you choose what you are comfortable with, what you look like, what you. I mean, if we share interests, if we share culture, share everything, everything we know, everything becomes much more easier, because then I don't have to challenge my own views on things. So I would say that there is a structural part in this that I've noticed myself in many contexts, actually.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, the structural part is the networks, and it's almost like, you know, the power elite that was prevalent, you know, right after the Second World War in the U.S., where you had the same people, you know, protecting themselves and getting themselves into jobs, and that does create something that looks like something nefarious. But when I can go out to dinner with some of those same people. They just, you know, I'm not in their network, right? And so, and also, you know, why I say that it's not direct racism is the amount of Swedish people that I'm helping as well that don't have the networks. It's not just a minority problem. And that's where, you know, it gives me some solace, like, because I would be really saddened if I felt it was true racism, why people weren't getting hired, is when I go out and say, hey, I have this where you can get a job in finance in, you know, Germany.
Yeah.
My LinkedIn is bombarded mostly by Swedish people that are seeing the same problem.
Yeah.
So, and listen, I have no proof. I'm probably the last guy to find out that this is racist.
No, but it's also about doing things differently. I mean, new people comes with new ideas, and you need to change. And it's much easier if everyone else has changed it. But when it comes to yourself, that you actually have to change to include more, that is a bigger journey that I'm not sure that everyone wants to do if not necessary. So, well, that's my view on it.
Yeah, but that's
I mean, I met a group of people who always take the decision, their like board decision in the sauna. I don't want to go into the sauna with a group of, I mean, that's, or on the after work with the beer. I mean, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
This coincides with my view of what my students experience. It's rarely outright kind of obnoxious prejudice, but it might be pretty similar in terms of the outcome.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful to think about the outcomes as a measure instead of poking inside people's head and asking about their motivations.
But I think, you know, to put, you know, to call it different things instead of diversity inclusion, I'm not sure it's sort of helpful for the engagement. I think it's probably better to not point out to people or accuse them of being racist or somehow. I mean, I think I very much agree with Sofia and your point about the structural the problem we have, and you know, definitely I would agree that's the case. But I don't think it's going to be beneficial for the development to put labels that are not necessarily helpful. I mean, the people who have done these decisions in the past, I'm sure they don't want to be called racist, and so I think it's a positive thing that people are aware, and then I think the other aspect is, of course, you know, do you measure, do you follow up, do you have a real interest in changing things? And I can tell you, you know, on the gender diversity point, when Goldman Sachs decided that 50% or 25% of their workforce are going to be, should be, or the MPs were going to be women, the moment you start to put the goal and you start to link incentives to it, created a completely different behavior, right, from people. Now that's a gender point, and I'm not sure it's completely relevant for this discussion. I'm not sure you want to put in a target like that, but I'm just sort of bringing it up and throwing it into the ring here, that if you fundamentally want to change things, then you also need to measure and follow up on things.
I totally agree, and have the right incentives at all levels. Yeah.
That's great. So now I think we're really out of time. I found it,
Good, because my battery is
really,
out. So
Yeah.
I found it really illuminating and refreshing that there's so much interesting thought and reflection about these issues, and that there's some sense of positive momentum. I say this both because I will keep having many foreign students in my program, but also because I care about Sweden, and I agree with what you've said about how this can help Sweden be a competitive country and the financial sector in Stockholm be a competitive part of the European financial system, which I think is awesome. And so that's great. Now, even if you don't really want to bring up anybody's flaws and criticize history and focus on awareness and positive examples and so on, you will run into some resistance. So when we sent out the invite for this, I received an email from someone who was really annoyed that we would even have this event, because it reflected an ideology. And so I think I just mentioned that because it is not uncontroversial, even if it seems like this is a very kind of inoffensive approach to diversity that the panel proposes, with much upside and limited downside. Even that's change, and change can hurt. And so there's going to be resistance down the line. At least when next time we encounter resistance, we can have the fortitude that comes from all these insights and all the positive momentum. So I find this a very, very interesting topic. We'll come back to it, I'm sure. And thank you all three so very much, and all the people who attended and participated in the Q&A. Thank you as well. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.